AITA for cutting my brother off after he ruined my engagement party. Hi Reddit. I'm really struggling with this situation and could use some outside perspective. I recently cut ties with my brother after he completely ruined my engagement party, and now my family is calling me dramatic and unreasonable. Was I wrong to end our relationship over it? #, #, the background. My older brother, Ryan, and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, he was the golden child, the star athlete, the class president, the one everyone adored. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, responsible sibling who flew under the radar. Despite our differences, we were close as kids. But as adults, his behavior has become increasingly toxic. Ryan has a history of drinking too much and making poor decisions when he's drunk. Over the years, he's embarrassed me at countless events, family reunions, holidays, even my college graduation. Each time, I forgave him because he's my brother, and deep down, I wanted to believe he'd change. Fast forward to last weekend. My fiancé, Chris, and I were hosting our engagement party at a nice restaurant. It was a big deal for us. We'd spent months planning it, and nearly all of our friends and family were there. Ryan promised me he'd behave himself, especially since this was such an important day for me. He even joked, "No wild antics this time, I swear." #, the conflict. The night started off well enough. Everyone was having fun, taking photos, and enjoying the food. Then Ryan showed up late, as usual, already visibly drunk. At first, it seemed harmless. He was cracking jokes and dancing awkwardly, but things quickly spiraled out of control. During speeches, Ryan interrupted my maid of honor mid-sentence to loudly declare, "Yeah, but does anyone else think this whole marriage thing is kind of dumb?" The room went silent, and I felt my face burn with embarrassment. Chris tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was upset. Things got worse during dinner. Ryan kept refilling his glass and slurring comments about how engagement parties are just excuses to show off. When Chris politely asked him to tone it down, Ryan snapped back, "What? Am I ruining your perfect little evening? Maybe you're not good enough for her anyway." That was the final straw. I pulled Ryan aside and begged him to leave before he caused more damage. Instead of apologizing, he laughed in my face and said, "You're overreacting. Lighten up." Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. #, the fallout. The rest of the party was awkward, to say the least. People kept asking if everything was okay, and Chris barely spoke to me for the rest of the night. When we got home, we had a huge fight. He accused me of enabling Ryan's behavior by letting him get away with stuff like this for years. "Why do you keep defending him?" he demanded. "He doesn't respect you or our relationship." I realized Chris was right. Ryan has been crossing lines for years, and I've always made excuses for him. This time, though, he crossed a line I can't ignore. So the next morning, I called Ryan and told him I couldn't be part of his life anymore unless he sought help for his drinking and took responsibility for his actions. His response? "Wow, way to throw me under the bus for one bad night. You're seriously cutting me off over this? Guess I'm not part of your perfect future after all." Now my parents are furious with me. They say I'm being overly dramatic and that families should forgive each other no matter what. My mom even accused me of prioritizing Chris over them, which isn't true. I just can't keep tolerating Ryan's destructive behavior. #, TLDR. My brother ruined my engagement party by getting drunk and making rude comments, including insulting my fiancé. I decided to cut him off until he gets help, and now my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for refusing to let my mom move in after she sold her house? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm caught between guilt and frustration. My mom recently sold her house and asked if she could move in with me temporarily while she figures out her next steps. I said no, and now she's accusing me of being ungrateful and selfish. Was I wrong to turn her down? #, the background. My mom is 62 years old and has lived alone since my dad passed away 5 years ago. For most of that time, she was fiercely independent. She took care of the house, managed her finances, and even traveled occasionally. But over the past year, I've noticed a decline in her ability to handle things on her own. She forgets appointments, struggles to keep up with household chores, and recently had a minor fall that left her shaken. A few weeks ago, she told me she decided to sell her house. At first, I thought it made sense. She doesn't need such a big place anymore, and the proceeds could give her financial security for retirement. But then she dropped a bombshell. Since I don't have anywhere to go yet, I was hoping I could stay with you for a little while. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my husband, Jake, and our 2-year-old daughter, Lily. Space is already tight. We converted the second bedroom into a nursery, so there's no extra room for her to sleep. Plus, we're both working full-time jobs, and taking care of Lily keeps us busy enough as it is. When I explained this to my mom, she brushed it off. "Oh, I'll just sleep on the couch," she said. "And I can help watch Lily during the day. It'll be fine." But I know it wouldn't be fine. My mom loves Lily, but she's not exactly reliable when it comes to childcare. Last summer, she babysat for an afternoon and ended up losing track of time watching TV, leaving Lily unsupervised in the backyard. #, the conflict. I told my mom gently but firmly that having her move in wasn't feasible right now. I suggested alternative options, like renting a small apartment or staying with one of my aunts who has more space. But she immediately got defensive. "How can you turn your back on your own mother?" she snapped. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" She reminded me of all the sacrifices she made raising me, working long hours, paying for my college tuition, supporting me through tough times. Then she accused me of being selfish and putting my family before hers. "You have a husband and a child," she said bitterly.
"But what about me?"
"Who do I have?" It broke my heart to hear her say that, but I stood my ground. I explained that it wasn't about gratitude, it was about practicality. Our apartment isn't set up for another adult, and adding someone else to the mix would create chaos. I also pointed out that she'd been talking about downsizing for months. She had plenty of time to plan for this transition. #, the fallout. Since that conversation, my mom has been giving me the silent treatment. She won't answer my calls or texts, and when I stop by her house to check on her, she refused to let me in. Instead, she sent me a text saying, "Don't bother coming around until you're ready to treat me like family." Meanwhile, my aunts and uncles are siding with her. They've called me multiple times to say things like, "She's your mom. You should make room for her," or "Family always comes first." Even Jake feels torn. He agrees that having her move in would be a bad idea, but he thinks I should at least offer to help financially. Now I'm stuck wondering if I made the right call. Should I have sacrificed my comfort and stability to let her stay, even though it would disrupt our lives? Or am I justified in setting boundaries? #, TLDR. My mom sold her house and asked to move in with me temporarily. I said no because our apartment is too small and chaotic for another adult. Now she's mad at me, and my extended family thinks I'm being selfish. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not letting my sister borrow money after she lost her job? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm feeling guilty, but also unsure if I made the wrong decision. My younger sister recently lost her job and asked me to lend her $5,000 to cover rent and bills while she looks for a new one. I said no, and now my family is calling me selfish and unsupportive. Was I out of line? #, the background. My sister, Emily, is 24 years old and has always struggled with responsibility. Growing up, she was the fun sibling, the one who charmed everyone with her personality, but never followed through on commitments. She dropped out of college after 2 semesters, bounced between jobs, and frequently relied on our parents for financial support. For the past year, she's been working as a server at a restaurant, which paid decently enough for her to live independently. But last month, she got fired for showing up late too many times. According to her, it wasn't entirely her fault. Her car broke down and she couldn't afford repairs, but I've heard similar excuses before. This isn't the first time she's lost a job due to poor planning or lack of accountability. When she called me to ask for $5,000, I was hesitant. I'm not exactly rolling in money myself. I work as a teacher and have student loans to pay off, but I do have some savings set aside for emergencies. Still, lending that much felt risky given her track record. So I told her I couldn't help financially, but offered other forms of support, like helping her update her resume or practice interviewing. The conflict. Emily didn't take my response well. She accused me of being heartless and abandoning her when she needed me most. "You're my sister," she yelled. "Family is supposed to stick together, but clearly, you don't care about me." Our mom overheard the argument and immediately sided with Emily. She lectured me about how I should be more compassionate and reminded me that I'm the responsible one, so it's my duty to bail Emily out. Dad chimed in too, saying, "What's $5,000 to you? You'll get it back eventually." But here's the thing, I don't think I'll get it back. Emily has borrowed money from me before for things like car repairs, medical bills, and even concert tickets, and rarely pays me back. The last time I lent her $1,000, she promised to repay me within 3 months. 2 years later, I'm still waiting. I tried explaining this to my family, but they dismissed my concerns. Mom said, "That's what family does. They forgive each other." Dad added, "She's going through a tough time. Can't you put aside your grudges and help hers?" It felt like they were painting me as the villain for setting boundaries. Meanwhile, Emily refuses to talk to me unless I agree to give her the money. The fallout. Since turning her down, I've been bombarded with guilt trips. Emily sends me angry texts accusing me of ruining her life. Mom calls me every day to plead her case, saying things like, "If something happens to her because you wouldn't help, you'll regret it forever." Even my friends are divided. Some say I did the right thing by protecting myself, while others think I should have helped regardless of the risks. Now I'm questioning whether I was too harsh. Should I have sucked it up and given her the money, even though I doubt she'd pay me back? Or am I justified in refusing to enable her bad habits? TLDR. My unemployed sister asked me to lend her $5,000 after losing her job. I said no because she has a history of borrowing money without repaying it. Now my family thinks I'm selfish, and I'm wondering if I made the wrong call. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not inviting my toxic cousin to my wedding? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm starting to second-guess myself. My wedding is in 2 months, and I've been getting a lot of flack from my family about not inviting my cousin, Sarah. They're calling me selfish and immature, but I feel like I have valid reasons for excluding her. Am I the asshole here? The background. Sarah is my first cousin on my mom's side. Growing up, we were pretty close. She was only a year older than me, and we spent most of our childhoods together. We went to the same schools, shared inside jokes, and even had sleepovers every weekend when we were kids. But as we got older, things changed. Around high school, Sarah started showing signs of jealousy and possessiveness that made our relationship increasingly toxic. She would constantly compare herself to me, whether it was grades, boyfriends, or extracurricular achievements, and always found ways to make me feel inferior. If I got something she wanted, like being cast in the lead role of the school play, she'd sulk for weeks and accuse me of stealing opportunities from her. Things really came to a head during college. I was dating this guy, Mark, who later became my fiancé. Sarah met him once at a family barbecue and immediately decided she liked him too. She started texting him behind my back, sending flirtatious messages and asking him personal questions about our relationship. When I confronted her, she denied it and accused me of being paranoid. Eventually, Mark showed me the texts and I cut ties with her completely. That was 5 years ago. Since then, Sarah has done everything she can to sabotage my happiness. She spread rumors about me at family gatherings, telling people I was clingy and controlling in my relationship with Mark. She even tried to convince my parents that Mark wasn't good enough for me, despite knowing how much he means to me. Suffice it to say, our relationship hasn't recovered. The conflict. When Mark proposed last year, I knew right away that I didn't want Sarah at the wedding. It wasn't just about the past drama. I genuinely don't trust her around my friends and family. I worry that she'll cause a scene or try to ruin the day somehow. Plus, seeing her there would make me anxious, and I want my wedding to be a happy, stress-free event. I told my mom about my decision early on, thinking she'd understand. Instead, she blew up at me. She said it was petty and immature to hold a grudge over something that happened years ago. She reminded me that Sarah is still family and insisted that leaving her off the guest list would create unnecessary tension. My dad agreed with Mom, saying, "You're supposed to forgive and move on. This is your special day. You shouldn't let old baggage ruin it." Even Mark seemed hesitant at first, though he eventually sided with me after hearing all the details. But the pressure from my family hasn't stopped. Every time we talk, they bring it up, guilt-tripping me into reconsidering. They say things like, "It's just one day. Can't you put aside your differences for that?" Or, "She's your cousin. Family comes first." Meanwhile, Sarah herself has been playing the victim. She sent me a message a few weeks ago saying, "I heard about the wedding. I guess I'm not important enough to be included."
Ugh.
Classic Sarah. #, #, the fallout. I've stuck to my guns so far, but the backlash is wearing me down. My mom refuses to help with any wedding planning unless I invite Sarah, which has created a ton of extra work for me. My aunt, Sarah's mom, keeps calling to plead her daughter's case, saying Sarah feels heartbroken and left out. And my uncle actually called me selfish for prioritizing my feelings over family unity. On top of all that, I'm starting to doubt myself. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am being petty. Should I suck it up and invite Sarah for the sake of peace? Or am I justified in keeping her away to protect myself and my marriage? #, TLDR. I didn't invite my toxic cousin to my wedding because of years of manipulative behavior and attempts to sabotage my relationship with my fiancé. Now my family is mad at me for excluding her, and I'm wondering if I made the wrong choice. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA, for refusing to share my inheritance with my siblings? Hi Reddit. I'm writing this because I feel like I'm in a moral gray area and I need some outside perspective. I'm not sure if I'm being selfish or just standing up for myself. Here's the situation. #, the background. My mom passed away about 6 months ago after a long battle with cancer. It was devastating, but she left behind an estate that included her house, savings, and some investments. She didn't have a will, which is another story entirely, so everything went through probate. After all the legal fees and taxes were paid, there was still a decent amount left, around $450,000. Now, here's where things get complicated. My mom had 3 kids, me, my older brother Alex, and my younger sister Claire. We're all adults now. Alex is 32, I'm 29, and Claire is 26. Growing up, we weren't exactly close as siblings. Our family dynamic has always been strained, to say the least. My parents divorced when I was young, and my dad remarried shortly after. He started a new family and kind of checked out of our lives emotionally. Meanwhile, my mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, which meant she wasn't around much either. As a result, I became the de facto parent figure for my siblings from a pretty early age. I helped raise them, made sure they got to school on time, cooked dinner when mom was working late, and even covered for them when they got into trouble. Don't get me wrong, I love my siblings, but it created this weird power imbalance between us. They've always leaned on me, while I felt more like their caretaker than their equal. Fast forward to today, Alex works as a freelance graphic designer and struggles financially. He's constantly bouncing from one gig to the next and rarely saves money. Claire, on the other hand, is a teacher who recently bought a condo with her boyfriend. She seems stable enough, though she's not exactly rolling in cash either. When it came time to divide the inheritance, I suggested splitting it equally among the 3 of us.
Simple, right?
But then Alex and Claire both turned to me and said, "You should take less." Their reasoning? Because I'd already benefited from living rent-free at mom's house for the past 5 years while caring for her during her illness. #, the conflict. Here's what really happened during those 5 years. When mom got diagnosed with cancer, I moved back home to help care for her. I quit my job, put my life on hold, and became her primary caregiver. That meant managing her medications, taking her to appointments, handling bills, and basically running the household. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. And yes, I lived there rent-free, but trust me, It wasn't exactly a vacation. The stress of watching someone you love slowly deteriorate is indescribable. Alex and Claire visited occasionally, but neither of them offered to move back or share the responsibility. Claire would come over once a month to help, but honestly, she mostly just added to my workload by needing guidance on basic tasks. Alex showed up maybe twice a year, usually drunk or high, and caused more problems than he solved. At one point, he even tried to borrow money from Mom's savings account, claiming he needed it for rent. I had to step in and stop him. So when they told me I should take less of the inheritance because I'd benefited from living with Mom, I was floored. To me, it felt like they were dismissing everything I'd sacrificed over those 5 years. I gave up my career, my social life, and any semblance of personal freedom to make sure Mom was comfortable and cared for. And now they wanted to penalize me for it? I refused to budge. I told them flat out that I deserved an equal share. No questions asked. That's when things got ugly. #, the fallout. Alex accused me of being greedy and self-centered. He said I was using Mom's illness as an excuse to hoard her money. Claire chimed in, saying I was being unfair because I'd already gotten something out of the arrangement. According to them, the fact that I lived in the house rent-free somehow negated my right to an equal share of the inheritance. I tried explaining that living there wasn't a perk, it was part of the caregiving package. If anything, I argued I deserved more because I bore the brunt of the responsibility. But they wouldn't listen. They kept insisting that I owed them something, that I should do the right thing and give up part of my share. At that point, I lost it. I told them they could take their guilt trips and shove them. Then I walked out of the room and haven't spoken to either of them since. #, where things stand now. The inheritance has been divided equally, per the law, but the damage to our relationship feels irreparable. Alex won't answer my calls, and Claire only communicates through passive-aggressive texts. Meanwhile, I can't shake the feeling that I did the right thing, but also the nagging doubt that maybe I should have compromised. Am I the asshole for refusing to share more of the inheritance? Or am I justified in standing my ground? #, TLDR. After our mom passed away, my siblings wanted me to take less of the inheritance because I'd lived with her rent-free, while caring for her during her illness. I refused, arguing that I deserved an equal share since I sacrificed so much to be her caregiver. Now they're mad at me, and I'm wondering if I made the wrong call. What do you guys think?
AITA?
AITA for telling my best friend I don't want her at my baby shower? Hi Reddit. I'm really torn about this situation and could use some perspective. I recently found out I'm pregnant with my first child, and my mom has been planning a baby shower for me. When she asked who to invite, I gave her a list of close friends and family, but I deliberately left off my best friend, Rachel. Now everyone thinks I'm being unreasonable, and I'm starting to question whether I made the right call. #, the background. Rachel and I have been best friends since middle school. We've been through everything together: high school drama, breakups, job changes, you name it. For most of our friendship, she's been my rock. But over the past couple of years, things have shifted. About 2 years ago, Rachel went through a messy divorce. She was devastated and leaned heavily on me for support. I was happy to help. I let her crash at my place when she needed space, listened to her vent for hours, and even helped her move into a new apartment. But as time went on, her behavior started to change. She became increasingly bitter and resentful, especially toward anyone in a relationship or starting a family. Whenever I talked about my boyfriend, now husband, she'd roll her eyes or make snarky comments like, "Must be nice to have your happily ever after." At first, I thought she was just jealous because of her own struggles, so I tried to be patient. But then she started making passive-aggressive remarks about kids too. Once, when I mentioned wanting to start a family someday, she laughed and said, "Good luck surviving childbirth." Sounds miserable. Fast forward to now, I'm 7 months pregnant, and Rachel hasn't exactly been supportive. She rarely asks how I'm feeling or shows interest in the pregnancy. When I told her about the baby shower, she joked, "Oh great, another excuse for people to buy tiny clothes they'll never wear again." It stung, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just uncomfortable because of her own issues. #, the conflict. The real problem came last month when Rachel invited me to lunch. During the meal, she spent almost the entire time complaining about how unfair life is for single women compared to married ones. She kept saying things like, "You don't know how lucky you are, and some of us aren't cut out for this whole settling down thing." Then, out of nowhere, she brought up the baby shower. "I hope you're not one of those moms who turns into a total bore once the baby arrives," she said. Like, "Please tell me we can still hang out without you talking about diapers and breastfeeding all the time." I was floored. Not only did she dismiss my excitement about becoming a mom, but she also implied that our friendship would suffer if I didn't conform to her expectations. That's when I realized inviting her to the baby shower would be a disaster waiting to happen. She'd either ruin the mood with her negativity or make me feel guilty for prioritizing my new family over our friendship. So I told my mom not to include her on the guest list. Big mistake. #, the fallout. When Rachel found out she wasn't invited, she flipped out. She called me crying, accusing me of abandoning her and choosing my perfect little family over our decades-long friendship. She said I was selfish for excluding her and claimed I didn't understand what it felt like to be left out. My mom was furious too. She accused me of being cold-hearted and said Rachel deserved to be there because she's been such an important part of my life. Even my husband thought I should reconsider, though he agreed that Rachel's attitude might cause problems. Now Rachel won't speak to me, and my mom keeps pressuring me to apologize and uninvite someone else to make room for her. Meanwhile, I'm stuck wondering if I made a huge mistake. Was I wrong to prioritize my comfort and happiness over including my best friend? #, TLDR. I didn't invite my best friend to my baby shower because of her negative attitude toward pregnancy and parenthood. Now she's mad at me, my mom is disappointed, and I'm questioning whether I was too harsh. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not giving my dad a second chance after he missed my college graduation? Hi Reddit. I'm hoping you can help me figure out if I'm being too harsh. My dad missed my college graduation ceremony last year because he forgot, and now he's asking for another chance to celebrate with me. I said no, and he's accusing me of holding a grudge. Was I wrong? #, the background. My dad and I have always had a rocky relationship. He left when I was 8 years old, citing irreconcilable differences with my mom. For most of my childhood, he was absent, no phone calls, no visits, nothing. When I turned 16, we reconnected, but our relationship has been strained ever since. Despite everything, I try to give him the benefit of the doubt. I invited him to important events like my high school graduation and prom, and while he didn't attend all of them, he at least made an effort to stay in touch. So when I graduated from college last spring, I assumed he'd show up. After all, this was a huge milestone, not just for me, but for both of us. I worked hard to get there, and I wanted him to be proud of me. The ceremony was scheduled months in advance, and I sent him multiple reminders. A week before the big day, he texted me saying, "Can't wait to see you walk across that stage." I was thrilled. He hadn't been to anything like this since I was a kid, and it felt like a step toward healing our fractured relationship. #, the conflict. On the morning of the ceremony, I woke up early, got dressed, and sent him a quick message, "See you soon." But as the hours passed, he never showed up. No call, no text, nothing. By the time the ceremony ended, I was devastated. I called him repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Later that evening, he finally texted me, "Hey, sorry I missed it. Totally slipped my mind. Congrats though." I couldn't believe it. How do you forget your daughter's college graduation? It wasn't like it was optional or spur of the moment. It was planned for months, and I reminded him constantly. His excuse felt lazy and dismissive, like he didn't care enough to make an effort. When I confronted him about it, he brushed me off. "It's not a big deal," he said. "You graduated anyway, right? Why are you so upset?" That response hurt more than his absence. It confirmed what I'd suspected for years. He doesn't prioritize me. Hashtag the fallout. Since then, I've kept my distance. We don't talk much anymore, and when we do, it's surface level stuff, nothing meaningful. Recently, though, he reached out to ask if we could plan a belated celebration for my graduation. He said he wants to make it up to me by taking me out to dinner and giving me a gift. I told him flat out that I wasn't interested.
You had your chance, I said.
You blew it. I don't want a redo.
He didn't take it well.
He accused me of being bitter and holding on to the past. People make mistakes, he argued. Don't let one bad moment define our relationship. But here's the thing, this wasn't one bad moment. It was part of a pattern. Missing my graduation wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the latest example of how he consistently fails to show up for me. Now my mom is on his side, saying I should forgive him and move on. She claims he's trying, and that I'm being unfair by shutting him out. But I don't feel like I owe him forgiveness. Am I wrong for feeling this way? TLDR. My dad missed my college graduation because he forgot, and now he wants to celebrate belatedly. I said no because his absence felt like yet another example of him not prioritizing me. He says I'm holding a grudge, and my mom agrees with him. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not letting my friend bring her boyfriend to my birthday trip? Hi Reddit. I'm feeling guilty, but also frustrated about a recent decision I made. For my 30th birthday, I planned a weekend getaway with a group of close friends. One of them, Sarah, asked if she could bring her boyfriend along, and I said no. Now she's mad at me, and I'm wondering if I was too harsh. The background. This trip has been in the works for months. It's just supposed to be me and 5 of my closest friends, a small, intimate celebration at a cozy cabin in the mountains. We've all known each other since college, and these trips are something we do every year. They're special to us because they give us a chance to reconnect without distractions like partners or work obligations. Sarah is one of my best friends, but she started dating Jake about 6 months ago, and lately, she's been bringing him everywhere. Don't get me wrong, Jake seems nice enough, but he's not part of our core group. None of us really know him well, and honestly, I don't think he'd mesh with the dynamic we have. When Sarah asked if Jake could come along, I hesitated. I explained that this trip is meant to be just for the 6 of us, and adding someone new would change the vibe. She argued that it wouldn't be fair to exclude him since they're in a serious relationship. He's part of my life now, she said. You guys will love him once you get to know him. But here's the thing. I've seen how Jake acts around large groups. He's quiet, awkward, and tends to cling to Sarah instead of engaging with others. I worried that having him there would make things uncomfortable for everyone, including him. Plus, the cabin only sleeps 6 people comfortably, and squeezing in a 7th would mean someone, probably me, would have to sleep on the couch. The conflict. When I told Sarah I couldn't accommodate Jake, she flipped out. So you're saying my boyfriend isn't welcome in your life? She snapped. What kind of friend doesn't support their friends' relationships? I tried explaining again that it wasn't personal, it was about maintaining the tradition and keeping the group dynamic intact. But she refused to listen. Instead, she accused me of being controlling and selfish. If you cared about me, you'd include him, she said. This isn't just your birthday. It's supposed to be fun for everyone. Things escalated quickly. She stopped speaking to me for weeks and even skipped a few group hangouts. When I reached out to apologize and clarify my reasoning, she brushed me off, saying, "Actions speak louder than words. You had your chance to fix this." The fallout. The rest of the group is divided. 2 of my friends agree with me. They understand why I wanted to keep the trip exclusive and think Sarah is overreacting. The other 2 side with her, saying I should have found a way to include Jake, even if it meant making sacrifices. Now Sarah says she won't participate in future trips unless Jake is invited too. Meanwhile, I'm stuck wondering if I ruined our friendship over something trivial. Was I wrong to prioritize the original plan over her request? TLDR. I didn't let my friend bring her boyfriend on my annual birthday trip because it's traditionally just for our core group of 6 friends. She's furious and says I'm excluding her from my life. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not telling my parents about my engagement until after the wedding? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm starting to doubt my decision. I got married last month, but I didn't tell my parents about the engagement or invite them to the wedding. They found out afterward and are now furious with me. Was I wrong to exclude them? #, #, the background. My fiancé, Matt, and I have been together for 5 years. We're both 32, financially stable, and ready to start a family. When we decided to get married, we knew it would be a small, intimate ceremony, just the two of us and a handful of close friends. Neither of us wanted a big, elaborate event. We preferred something simple and meaningful. The problem lies with my parents. Our relationship has been strained for years due to their constant criticism and interference in my life. From the moment I introduced Matt to them, they've made it clear they don't approve of him. At first, it was subtle comments like, "Are you sure he's ambitious enough?" or "He doesn't seem very polished." Over time, their disapproval became more blatant. They stopped inviting us to family gatherings, refused to acknowledge our milestones like buying a house, and even hinted that I could do better. Despite all this, Matt and I tried to maintain a relationship with them. We visited occasionally, sent holiday cards, and included them in important conversations. But every interaction left me feeling drained and unappreciated. Eventually, I realized they weren't going to change their minds about him, or about me, for choosing someone they didn't approve of. #, the conflict. When Matt proposed, we agreed not to tell my parents right away. We were afraid of their reaction and didn't want their negativity to overshadow our happiness. Instead, we quietly planned our wedding, a courthouse ceremony followed by a celebratory dinner with our closest friends. After the wedding, I called my mom to share the news. Her response was immediate and explosive. "You got married without telling us. How dare you exclude your own family?" She accused me of being selfish, disrespectful, and immature. My dad chimed in too, saying, "This is what happens when you cut us out of your life. Clearly, you don't care about us anymore." Their anger caught me off guard. I tried explaining that it wasn't personal, it was about protecting myself and Matt from their judgment. I reminded them of how they'd treated him over the years and said I couldn't risk ruining such an important day. But they refused to listen. Instead, they doubled down, calling me ungrateful and accusing me of throwing away years of love and support. #, the fallout. Since that phone call, communication with my parents has completely broken down. They won't answer my calls or texts, and when I stop by their house, they refuse to let me in. My mom sent me a scathing email saying, "If you didn't want us at your wedding, fine. But don't expect us to pretend everything is okay." Meanwhile, my extended family has taken sides. Some relatives agree with my parents, saying I should have at least given them the option to attend. Others think I did the right thing by prioritizing my peace of mind. Even Matt feels torn. He understands why I kept it private but worries about the long-term impact on our relationship with my parents. Now I'm questioning whether I made the wrong call. Should I have swallowed my pride and invited them, even though I knew they wouldn't approve? Or am I justified in keeping them out of such a personal and joyful moment? #, TLDR. I didn't tell my parents about my engagement or invite them to my wedding because of their ongoing disapproval of my husband. They found out afterward and are now furious with me. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not telling my parents about my engagement until after the wedding? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm starting to doubt my decision. I got married last month, but I didn't tell my parents about the engagement or invite them to the wedding. They found out afterward and are now furious with me. Was I wrong to exclude them? #, the background. My fiancé, Matt, and I have been together for 5 years. We're both 32, financially stable, and ready to start a family. When we decided to get married, we knew it would be a small, intimate ceremony, just the two of us and a handful of close friends. Neither of us wanted a big, elaborate event. We preferred something simple and meaningful. The problem lies with my parents. Our relationship has been strained for years due to their constant criticism and interference in my life. From the moment I introduced Matt to them, they've made it clear they don't approve of him. At first, it was subtle comments like, "Are you sure he's ambitious enough?" Or, "He doesn't seem very polished." Over time, their disapproval became more blatant. They stopped inviting us to family gatherings, refused to acknowledge our milestones like buying a house, and even hinted that I could do better. Despite all this, Matt and I tried to maintain a relationship with them. We visited occasionally, sent holiday cards, and included them in important conversations. But every interaction left me feeling drained and unappreciated. Eventually, I realized they weren't going to change their minds about him, or about me, for choosing someone they didn't approve of. #, #, the conflict. When Matt proposed, we agreed not to tell my parents right away. We were afraid of their reaction and didn't want their negativity to overshadow our happiness. Instead, we quietly planned our wedding, a courthouse ceremony followed by a celebratory dinner with our closest friends. After the wedding, I called my mom to share the news. Her response was immediate and explosive. "You got married without telling us. How dare you exclude your own family?" She accused me of being selfish, disrespectful, and immature. My dad chimed in too, saying, "This is what happens when you cut us out of your life. Clearly, you don't care about us anymore." Their anger caught me off guard. I tried explaining that it wasn't personal, it was about protecting myself and Matt from their judgment. I reminded them of how they'd treated him over the years and said I couldn't risk ruining such an important day. But they refused to listen. Instead, they doubled down, calling me ungrateful and accusing me of throwing away years of love and support. #, the fallout. Since that phone call, communication with my parents has completely broken down. They won't answer my calls or texts, and when I stop by their house, they refuse to let me in. My mom sent me a scathing email saying, "If you didn't want us at your wedding, fine. But don't expect us to pretend everything is okay." Meanwhile, my extended family has taken sides. Some relatives agree with my parents, saying I should have at least given them the option to attend. Others think I did the right thing by prioritizing my peace of mind. Even Matt feels torn. He understands why I kept it private but worries about the long-term impact on our relationship with my parents. Now I'm questioning whether I made the wrong call. Should I have swallowed my pride and invited them, even though I knew they wouldn't approve? Or am I justified in keeping them out of such a personal and joyful moment? #, TLDR. I didn't tell my parents about my engagement or invite them to my wedding because of their ongoing disapproval of my husband. They found out afterward and are now furious with me. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not telling my parents about my engagement until after the wedding? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm starting to doubt my decision. I got married last month, but I didn't tell my parents about the engagement or invite them to the wedding. They found out afterward and are now furious with me. Was I wrong to exclude them? #, the background. My fiancé, Matt, and I have been together for 5 years. We're both 32, financially stable, and ready to start a family. When we decided to get married, we knew it would be a small, intimate ceremony, just the two of us and a handful of close friends. Neither of us wanted a big, elaborate event. We preferred something simple and meaningful. The problem lies with my parents. Our relationship has been strained for years due to their constant criticism and interference in my life. From the moment I introduced Matt to them, they've made it clear they don't approve of him. At first, it was subtle comments like, "Are you sure he's ambitious enough?" Or, "He doesn't seem very polished." Over time, their disapproval became more blatant. They stopped inviting us to family gatherings, refused to acknowledge our milestones like buying a house, and even hinted that I could do better. Despite all this, Matt and I tried to maintain a relationship with them. We visited occasionally, sent holiday cards, and included them in important conversations. But every interaction left me feeling drained and unappreciated. Eventually, I realized they weren't going to change their minds about him, or about me, for choosing someone they didn't approve of. #, the conflict. When Matt proposed, we agreed not to tell my parents right away. We were afraid of their reaction and didn't want their negativity to overshadow our happiness. Instead, we quietly planned our wedding, a courthouse ceremony followed by a celebratory dinner with our closest friends. After the wedding, I called my mom to share the news. Her response was immediate and explosive. "You got married without telling us. How dare you exclude your own family?" She accused me of being selfish, disrespectful, and immature. My dad chimed in too, saying, "This is what happens when you cut us out of your life. Clearly, you don't care about us anymore." Their anger caught me off guard. I tried explaining that it wasn't personal, it was about protecting myself and Matt from their judgment. I reminded them of how they'd treated him over the years and said I couldn't risk ruining such an important day. But they refused to listen. Instead, they doubled down, calling me ungrateful and accusing me of throwing away years of love and support. #, the fallout. Since that phone call, communication with my parents has completely broken down. They won't answer my calls or texts, and when I stop by their house, they refuse to let me in. My mom sent me a scathing email saying, "If you didn't want us at your wedding, fine. But don't expect us to pretend everything is okay." Meanwhile, my extended family has taken sides. Some relatives agree with my parents, saying I should have at least given them the option to attend. Others think I did the right thing by prioritizing my peace of mind. Even Matt feels torn. He understands why I kept it private but worries about the long-term impact on our relationship with my parents. Now I'm questioning whether I made the wrong call. Should I have swallowed my pride and invited them, even though I knew they wouldn't approve? Or am I justified in keeping them out of such a personal and joyful moment? #TLDR. I didn't tell my parents about my engagement or invite them to my wedding because of their ongoing disapproval of my husband. They found out afterward and are now furious with me. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for secretly paying off my brother's debt without telling him? Hi Reddit. I'm in a weird situation and could really use some outside perspective. A few months ago, I secretly paid off my brother's massive credit card debt without telling him. Now he's furious with me, saying I overstepped and humiliated him. Was I wrong to help him in this way? #, the background. My younger brother, Ethan, is 28 years old and has always struggled with money management. Growing up, he was the fun sibling, the one who charmed everyone but never thought about consequences. As an adult, that impulsiveness translated into poor financial decisions. He racks up credit card debt faster than he can pay it off, often living paycheck to paycheck despite having a decent job as a graphic designer. Over the years, our family has tried to help him get back on track. My parents have loaned him money multiple times, only for him to blow through it without making lasting changes. I've also bailed him out a few times, usually small amounts like $500 or $1,000, but each time I felt frustrated because he never seemed to learn from his mistakes. Last year, Ethan confided in me that his credit card debt had spiraled out of control. Between medical bills, car repairs, and overspending during the pandemic, he owed nearly $30,000 across 3 different cards. He sounded defeated, admitting he didn't know how he'd ever pay it all off. At the time, I listened sympathetically but didn't offer any solutions. I told him I believed in him and encouraged him to create a budget. But behind the scenes, I couldn't stop thinking about his situation. I knew he was drowning, and while part of me wanted to let him figure it out on his own, another part of me couldn't bear to see him struggle. So, I came up with a plan. #, the conflict. About 6 months ago, I decided to pay off Ethan's entire debt. I had recently come into a large inheritance from my grandmother, which gave me more financial flexibility than I'd ever had before. After discussing it with my husband, who supported the idea, I transferred the full amount directly to Ethan's creditors, effectively wiping his slate clean. I didn't tell him what I'd done right away. Instead, I waited a week and then casually mentioned that I'd noticed his accounts were suddenly zeroed out. When he asked how that happened, I confessed I took care of it. "You don't owe me anything, it's a gift." Instead of being grateful, Ethan blew up at me. How dare you interfere in my life like that, he shouted. Do you think I'm incapable of handling my own problems? This isn't your responsibility. He accused me of undermining his independence and treating him like a charity case. He said I made him feel like a failure, like he couldn't take care of himself. Then he stormed out of my house, refusing to speak to me for weeks. #, #, the fallout. When Ethan finally calmed down enough to talk, he reiterated that he appreciated the gesture, but hated how I went about it. You should have talked to me first, he said. Even if I couldn't repay you, at least I would have felt like I had a say in it. Our parents weighed in too, though they were divided. My mom thought I did the right thing, saying sometimes people need help whether they ask for it or not. My dad, however, sided with Ethan, arguing that I disrespected his autonomy by acting without his consent. Meanwhile, Ethan started withdrawing from the family. He stopped attending Sunday dinners, ignored my texts, and even unfollowed me on social media. It felt like he was punishing me for trying to help him. Now I'm questioning whether I crossed a line. Did I overstep by taking matters into my own hands? Or was I justified in stepping in when I saw someone I love struggling? #, TLDR. I secretly paid off my brother's $30,000 credit card debt to help him get back on his feet. Instead of being grateful, he's furious with me, saying I humiliated him and violated his independence. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA, for refusing to name my son after my husband's deceased brother? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm caught between respecting my husband's wishes and standing up for myself. We're expecting our first child in a few months, and my husband wants us to name him after his deceased brother. I said no, and now he's accusing me of being selfish and heartless. Was I wrong? #, the background. My husband, Alex, lost his older brother, Daniel, in a car accident when they were teenagers. From what Alex has told me, Daniel was not only his sibling, but also his best friend and role model. Losing him was devastating for Alex and their entire family. Even though it happened over a decade ago, Alex still talks about Daniel often, sharing stories and memories with me. When we found out we were having a baby boy, Alex immediately suggested naming him Daniel. At first, I thought it was sweet, a way to honor his brother and keep his memory alive. But as the reality of parenthood set in, I started feeling uneasy about the idea. For one thing, I've always dreamed of giving my children unique names that reflect their individuality. Naming our son Daniel feels like erasing part of who he is before he's even born. Plus, I worry about the emotional weight that comes with sharing a name with someone so significant in Alex's life. What if our son grows up feeling like he has to live up to Daniel's legacy? Or worse, what if Alex subconsciously compares them? When I brought these concerns to Alex, he dismissed them entirely. It's just a name, he said. It doesn't define who he'll be. It's about honoring Daniel and keeping him close to us. But to me, it's not just a name. Names carry meaning, history, and identity. I want our son to have a fresh start, untethered from expectations or comparisons. So I gently explained that while I understand how much Daniel means to him, I don't feel comfortable using the name for our child. #, the conflict. Alex didn't take my refusal well. He accused me of being selfish and insensitive, saying, "You're putting your feelings ahead of mine and Daniel's memory." He reminded me of all the sacrifices he's made for our relationship and implied that this was my chance to give something back. Then things got worse. His parents heard about the disagreement and weighed in, guilt-tripping me into reconsidering. His mom tearfully said, "Daniel was such a wonderful person. Don't you think he deserves to be remembered?" His dad added, "This isn't just about Alex, it's about our whole family." I tried explaining again that it wasn't about diminishing Daniel's importance. It was about creating space for our son to forge his own identity. But they refused to listen, painting me as cold and unfeeling for refusing to honor their late son. Now Alex barely speaks to me unless absolutely necessary. When he does, it's usually to remind me how disappointed he is. Meanwhile, his family has stopped inviting me to gatherings, making it clear that they blame me for the rift. #, the fallout. The tension has spilled over into other areas of our lives, too. Alex has become distant, spending more time at work and less time preparing for the baby. When I try to discuss baby names or nursery plans, he shuts down the conversation, saying, "We'll talk about it later." Friends and mutual acquaintances have started taking sides. Some agree with Alex, saying I should prioritize his feelings since naming traditions are important. Others side with me, arguing that I have every right to choose a name I'm comfortable with. Now I'm stuck wondering if I made the wrong call. Should I sacrifice my preferences to honor Daniel's memory, even though it makes me uncomfortable? Or am I justified in standing my ground? #TLDR. My husband wants to name our son after his deceased brother, but I refused because I don't want our child to carry the emotional weight of that legacy. Now my husband and his family are mad at me, and I'm questioning whether I was too selfish. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for refusing to let my mom throw me a bridal shower? Hi Reddit. I need some advice because I'm starting to second-guess myself. My mom offered to throw me a bridal shower, but I turned her down because I didn't want the stress or attention. Now she's hurt and accusing me of rejecting her love. Was I wrong? #the background. I'm getting married in 3 months, and my mom has been super excited about helping with the wedding planning. She's always dreamed of throwing me a big, traditional bridal shower, one of those events with fancy decorations, games, and dozens of guests. She even started talking about it as soon as we announced our engagement. The problem is, I've never been into the idea of a bridal shower. To me, it feels outdated and overly performative, a chance for people to give gifts under the guise of celebrating the bride. Plus, I hate being the center of attention, especially at events where everyone's focus is on me. The thought of standing in front of a room full of women playing silly games and opening presents makes me cringe. When my mom brought up the topic again recently, I politely told her that I didn't want a bridal shower. I explained that I'd rather skip it and use the time to focus on other aspects of the wedding. I also mentioned that I didn't feel comfortable asking people to spend money on gifts when we already have everything we need. #the conflict. My mom didn't take the news well. At first, she tried to convince me otherwise, saying things like, "But it's tradition, and it's your last hurrah before marriage." When I stood firm, she got emotional. "Why are you shutting me out?" she asked. "This is my way of showing you how much I love you." Things escalated quickly after that. She accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, saying I was denying her the opportunity to celebrate me. Then she guilt-tripped me by bringing up all the sacrifices she's made for me over the years. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me," she said. "You're ruining what should be a happy time." Her reaction blindsided me. I thought she'd understand that it wasn't personal, it was just about my preferences. But instead, she acted like I was rejecting her love and effort. #the fallout. Since that conversation, my mom has been giving me the cold shoulder. She refuses to discuss any wedding-related plans unless I agree to let her host the shower. She's also stopped inviting me to family dinners, claiming she needs space to process her feelings. Meanwhile, my bridesmaids and future mother-in-law are divided. Some think I should compromise and let her throw the shower to avoid hurting her feelings. Others agree with me, saying I shouldn't feel pressured into doing something I don't want. Now I'm questioning whether I was too harsh. Should I have sucked it up and let her host the shower, even though it would make me uncomfortable? Or am I justified in prioritizing my own happiness and boundaries? #TLDR. I turned down my mom's offer to throw me a bridal shower because I don't want the stress or attention. Now she's mad at me, saying I'm rejecting her love and efforts. AITA? What do you guys think? AITA for not inviting my stepdad to my wedding after he walked out on my mom? Hi Reddit. I'm feeling torn about a decision I made regarding my wedding guest list. I didn't invite my stepdad because he left my mom for another woman 2 years ago, and now he's accusing me of being petty and holding a grudge. Was I wrong? #the background. My stepdad, Greg, married my mom when I was 10 years old. For most of my childhood, he was the only father figure I knew. My biological dad disappeared before I was born. Greg stepped up in ways I'll always appreciate, coaching my soccer team, helping me with homework, and being there for important milestones like graduations and birthdays. But things changed 2 years ago when Greg suddenly announced he was leaving my mom for another woman. The betrayal hit our family hard. My mom was devastated, and I felt blindsided. What hurt the most was how quickly he moved on. He started dating this new woman within weeks of leaving, and they got engaged just 6 months later. It felt like he had been planning his exit long before he told us. Since then, Greg has tried to stay in touch, sending occasional texts and asking if we can keep things normal. But to me, nothing about this situation feels normal. Every time I see him, I'm reminded of the pain he caused my mom and, by extension, me. So when it came time to plan my wedding, I decided not to include him on the guest list. #, the conflict. When Greg found out he wasn't invited, he called me upset. "How could you exclude me from such an important day?" he demanded. "I've been part of your life since you were a kid. You're acting like I did something unforgivable." I explained that his actions were unforgivable, at least to me. Leaving my mom after decades of marriage and moving on so quickly felt like a slap in the face to our entire family. I told him I needed space to heal and couldn't imagine celebrating my happiest day with someone who caused so much hurt. Greg didn't accept that answer. He accused me of being immature and letting emotions cloud my judgment. "This isn't about your mom, it's about you and me," he said. "You're throwing away years of memories because of one mistake." His words stung, but I stood my ground. I reminded him that his mistake shattered our family and that forgiveness isn't something I owe him. #, the fallout. Things have gotten worse since that conversation. Greg has stopped speaking to me entirely, and my mom is caught in the middle. On one hand, she supports my decision because she understands why I feel betrayed. On the other hand, she worries that cutting ties with Greg will create more tension between us. To make matters worse, some of my relatives are siding with Greg. They say I'm being too harsh and that weddings are supposed to bring people together, not drive them apart. One aunt even told me, "He's still family, whether you like it or not. You should give him another chance." Now I'm questioning whether I overreacted. Should I have swallowed my feelings and invited him for the sake of peace? Or am I justified in keeping him away from such a meaningful day? #, TLDR. I didn't invite my stepdad to my wedding because he left my mom for another woman and caused a lot of pain in our family. Now he's mad at me, and some relatives think I'm being unreasonable. AITA? What do you guys think?